Imagine this. You're the most powerful man in the world. You command legions that have conquered from Britain to the deserts of Mesopotamia. Your word is law across 3 continents. You're the Roman emperor. Now imagine being forced to your hands and knees like an animal. A foreign king places his boot on your back and uses you, the emperor of Rome, as a stepping stool to mount his horse. While foreign dignitaries watch and laugh. This isn't fiction. This actually happened. In 260 AD, Emperor Valerian became the only Roman emperor in history to be captured alive in battle. What happened to him next was so brutal, so humiliating, that it shocked the ancient world. And here's the thing. It happened during Rome's darkest hour, when the empire was already tearing itself apart. This is the story of one catastrophic defeat that became the symbol of Rome's 3rd century crisis. Welcome back to Jeremy Roman Empire. I am your host, Jeremy Ryan Slate. Reminder to like this video, leave us a comment, or smash that subscribe button if you want to learn more about the Roman Empire and what we can learn from it. To understand how a Roman emperor ended up as a human footstool, you need to understand just how bad things had gotten by 260 AD. Rome was in free fall. We're talking about the 3rd century crisis, 50 years of absolute chaos. In the 50 years before Valerian's capture, Rome had seen over 25 different emperors. Most were murdered by their own soldiers. The average reign? It was about 2 years, but it wasn't just political chaos. A devastating plague was sweeping through the empire, killing thousands daily. The economy was collapsing. Inflation was out of control as emperors debased the currency to pay their armies. Silver content in coins dropped from 90% to barely 5%. Imagine your money losing 95% of its value in a generation. And on every border, pushing in. Germanic tribes in the north, Goths in the east, and in the east itself, the most dangerous threat of all, the Sassanid Persian Empire under King Shapur I. Shapur wasn't like the old Parthian kings Rome had fought for centuries. He was ambitious, ruthless, and he had a modern, well-organized army. He'd already invaded Roman territory multiple times, sacking cities and taking prisoners. Think about how we talk about empires today in decline. Economic crisis, political instability, enemies at the gate. Rome in 260 AD was experiencing all of it simultaneously. It's like watching a superpower unravel in real time. Valerian became emperor in 253 AD when he was already in his 60s. He was a senator, a traditionalist, and he believed that Roman strength through Roman values. He famously persecuted Christians, seeing them as a threat to the traditional Roman religion during a time of crisis. But his biggest problem wasn't Christians. It was Shapur. By 260 AD, Shapur had invaded again. This time he was besieging Edessa, a critical Roman city in Mesopotamia, near modern-day Turkey. Edessa was strategically vital. If it fell, the entire eastern frontier would collapse. Valerian had no choice. He gathered his legions and marched east to confront Shapur directly. But here's the problem. His army was already weakened. The plague that had been ravaging the empire, well, it hit his troops hard as well. Ancient sources tell us that soldiers were dying by the thousands before they even reached the battlefield. Morale was at an all-time low. Supplies were scarce, and Valerian was facing one of the most capable military commanders of the ancient world. The two armies met near Edessa, Roman legions, the heavy infantry that had conquered the known world, against Persian cavalry and archers. On paper, Rome should have had the advantage. Roman discipline, Roman tactics, and Roman superiority. But this wasn't the Rome of Augustus or Trajan. This was a Rome that was falling apart, eating itself alive. The Battle of Edessa was a disaster from the start. Calvary is a hill in Jerusalem. The Battle of Edessa was a disaster from the start. Shapur's cavalry harassed the Roman flanks. His archers rained arrows down on the legions. The Romans, weakened by plague and exhausted from the march, couldn't maintain their formations. Panic spread across the ranks. Some sources suggest that Valerian tried to negotiate, that he rode out to meet Shapur under a flag of truce, hoping to arrange terms. If that was true, that was a fatal mistake. Shapur seized him. Other sources say he was captured during the chaos of the battle itself, surrounded and overwhelmed when his army broke and fled. Either way, the result was the same. Emperor Valerian, the ruler of the Roman Empire, was now a prisoner of the Persian king. The entire Roman army was destroyed or captured. Thousands of soldiers were killed. Thousands more were taken as slaves and forced to build Persian infrastructure, bridges, dams, and irrigation systems. Some of these structures, like the Bande Kaiser Bridge, still stand in Iran today, built by Roman prisoners. But Valerian's fate would be far worse than that of slavery. Shapur didn't just capture a Roman emperor, he turned him into a living symbol of Persian supremacy. Ancient sources describe how Valerian was dressed in purple, the imperial color, and paraded before visiting kings and dignitaries. Not as a dignified prisoner, but as a trophy, a broken symbol of Roman power. And here's the detail that ancient writers couldn't stop talking about. Whenever Shapur wanted to mount his horse, he would summon Valerian. The emperor of Rome would be forced to get down on his hands and knees. Shapur would place his boot on Valerian's back and use him, the Roman emperor, as a stepping stool. Let that sink in. The man who commanded legions, who ruled an empire that stretched from Spain to Syria, was reduced to a piece of furniture. This wasn't just personal humiliation. This was a calculated political statement. Shapur was showing the world that Rome, the eternal empire, the invincible superpower, could be broken, could be humiliated, and could be defeated. And Rome couldn't do anything about it. Valerian's son, Gallienus, was now ruling Rome. Some sources say Shapur demanded a massive ransom for Valerian's return, and Gallienus refused, or he couldn't pay it. The empire was too broke, too chaotic, and too weak. So Valerian remained in captivity for years. Now we get to the part that ancient writers disagree on, but all agree was horrific. The Christian writer Lactantius, writing a few decades later, gives us the most detailed account. He says that after years of humiliation, Shapur finally decided to end Valerian's life in the most brutal way possible. According to Lactantius, Valerian was flayed alive. His skin was removed from his body while he was still alive. Then his skin was dyed with red vermilion and displayed in the most important Persian temple as a trophy. A lasting reminder of Rome's defeat. Other sources suggest he was forced to drink molten gold, a symbolic punishment for Roman greed. Before being killed and skinned, the historian Zosimus gives a less dramatic account, saying Valerian was simply held in slavery until he died of natural causes. But here's what we know for certain. Valerian never saw Rome again. His body was never recovered, and the Persians kept some kind of trophy, whether this is his actual skin or a representation displayed in their temples for generations. For Romans, this was unthinkable. Emperors were supposed to die gloriously in battle or peacefully in their beds. They were supposed to be cremated with full honors and deified. Valerian got none of that. He died in captivity, humiliated, and his body was desecrated by Rome's enemies. So how did Rome respond to this unprecedented catastrophe? Well, the short answer is they couldn't. Gallienus, ruling in Rome, faced revolts across the empire. The Gallic Empire broke away in the west, the Palmyrene Empire broke away in the east, and at one point, Rome controlled only Italy and North Africa. The empire was literally splitting apart. The Senate was powerless, and the army was demoralized. The economy itself was in ruins, and Shapur? Well, he commemorated his victory with a massive rock relief carved into the cliffs across Persia. And you can still see them today. Images of Shapur on horseback with a Roman emperor kneeling before him. These weren't hidden away. They were carved on major roads, visible to anyone traveling through Persian territory. For Rome, Valerian's capture became a symbol of the 3rd century crisis itself, a moment when the empire's invincibility was shattered, when the unthinkable became reality. Christian writers saw it as divine punishment, and Valerian had persecuted Christians, and now God had delivered him into the hands of pagans to suffer the ultimate humiliation. But here's the thing about Rome. They survived. The empire eventually recovered. Emperors like Aurelian and Diocletian would reunify the empire and restore order. But Rome was never quite the same. The myth of invincibility was gone. The empire learned it could be defeated, humiliated, and broken. And in some ways, Valerian's capture was the beginning of the end. It showed that Rome's enemies didn't fear them anymore, that Rome's emperors could be captured, humiliated, and killed, that the empire was mortal. When we watch superpowers today struggle with economic crisis, political division, and challenges from rising powers, we're watching the same pattern. Empires don't usually fall in one dramatic moment. They decline gradually through a series of humiliations and defeats that chip away at their power and prestige. Valerian's capture was one of those moments for Rome. Not the fall itself, but a sign that the fall was coming. 3rd century crisis is full of stories like this. Moments of absolute chaos that somehow, against all odds, Rome survived. Emperors murdered by their own troops like Aurelian, the empire splitting into separate kingdoms, hyperinflation destroying the economy, barbarian invasions on every frontier, and yet Rome endured. If you want to understand how Rome survived its darkest hour, hit that subscribe button. I'm covering the entire 3rd century crisis, the emperors, the battles, the economic collapse, and the eventual recovery. Drop a comment. What do you think was worse for Valerian? The initial capture and being used as a footstool, or his final fate? And do you think Gallienus should have paid the ransom? Thanks for watching. Remember, history doesn't repeat, but it sure does rhyme. This has been Jeremy Roman Empire, and I am your host, Jeremy Ryan Slate. You can find me on X, and you can check out jeremyryanslate.com. I'll catch you next time.